For Memorial Day weekend, you've found the Georgia Gang. Topping our agenda today, the Super Bowl will return to Atlanta. The state of Georgia might derail the Atlanta streetcar. And the election results, the focus is on Cobb County. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
And we're glad you'll be with us on this Sunday. We pause for just a moment to remember all those who died, gave their lives to their country in our many wars, and those wars that are still ongoing. It is Memorial Day weekend. Everyone should try to make some observance on what is really known as a three-day holiday weekend. We had a little problem deciding how to arrange this broadcast. We've got more news than we know what to do with. So we're going to begin with a nod to Cobb County. We don't want you to miss that because that's going to be the big election of the summer. But first, let's talk about something that doesn't happen very often, and that's the Super Bowl. Arthur Blank and his team went to Charlotte and came home with Super Bowl 53, which will be in 2019.
Right.
There are my numbers.
Yep.
Huge civic victory.
Yes.
It was assumed we would get a Super Bowl of the three that were up for grabs.
Yes.
We got the one we wanted.
Yes.
Right.
And Jeff, hey, National Basketball Championship.
Right.
National Football Championship in college.
And this sandwiched in between.
And this in between. Amazing.
We're
on a roll.
Absolutely. And we, as you said, we were expecting this from the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, which is going to be an incredible facility, by the way. But I think that this is great for Atlanta. It's great for the Falcons. It's great for Arthur Blank. And really, really super for this new stadium, I think. And so we're on a roll. I know you want to talk about the streetcar. The streetcar was part of the sales pitch. Clearly, you can get from Mercedes-Benz Stadium right over to the North Side hotels on the north side of downtown, and so we're going to have the streetcar running, and we're going to have MARTA running, and all the other transit, because were it not for transit and the ability to move people around, we would not have the Super Bowl.
Now,
well, we also ought to nod to the leadership that made this happen, and that's of course the governor and Mayor Kasim Reed and all of the folks that worked so hard.
well, yes, and the civic leaders who presented the case in Charlotte. There were hugs and high fives all around. It's not the Olympics, but it's pretty close.
A lot of money coming into this area.
I don't want to slow us down. Can you imagine the first time they test the roof on the Mercedes-Benz Stadium? First time they're going to hit the button that says, "Okay, roof, open up." Arthur Blank's stomach is going to have to be in his throat.
That's right.
The first time
You remember in 2000 we had the ice storm, so the roof better work if.
Well, it's definitely going to need to be
great
closed when they come in January or February now, whenever the game is scheduled.
Better work better
It's
than the
always
streetcars
cold.
working.
It's
Now,
always
not
cold
to be
in Atlanta
the
then.
Grinch that stole the Super Bowl, but the day after Atlanta was awarded the Super Bowl, Attorney General Sam Olens joined 11 other states in suing the Obama administration over what the states consider his overreach on transgender issues. We still have viewers out there, I'll guarantee you, who think the transgender is a Continental Railway. They have no idea what this is about. It is a fetish of this Obama administration.
It is not.
Aimed at turning the attention of the American people from the sorry state of the economy and the rest of it. But could this lawsuit, there's my speech, can this lawsuit derail that metaphor again, the Super Bowl?
It very well could, because I think that professional sports teams have shown that they can be a little fickle when it comes to these issues, or a little antsy, I should say, because they want to avoid any association with discrimination. And we saw that, in fact, with the RFRA bill during the last legislative session. And so if we continue down this path, I think that we could endanger all this economic activity. What we've got right now in Georgia looks like, an awful lot of anti-business so-called conservatives whose fetish, this is their fetish, it's not Obama's fetish, right? They invented this issue in North Carolina, and then they exported it across the rest of the nation.
Jeff, let me answer, Jeff, because you and I both agreed last week that this Obama so-called guidance letter never defined transgender. You and I agreed on that. That is a big issue. Now, going back to our Attorney General, Sam Olens, suing, this is going to be an issue in the lawsuit.
You don't sue.
And it's an
well,
overreach.
First of all,
it's an overreach by the president.
It isn't, you know, you're suing over something that isn't a law. It's an interpretation of a law, of Title
with
IX,
a threat.
right?
With a threat.
It's an interpretation of
That's
Title
where
IX.
Sam Olens says you cannot, it's unconstitutional to withhold federal money. Now, that's going to be at the heart of this
That's
lawsuit,
what the suit's
too.
about.
Well, the president is using his bully pulpit
He's
to
using his bullying tactics.
to stand up for the rights of minorities, which need to be respected, and equal protection under the law for all citizens.
This doesn't have anything to do with
equally.
discrimination. This is the
Yes,
myth
it
of the
does.
left-wing propaganda. This has to do with defining who is transgender. If you can define who is transgender, I think most people might be comfortable with that. But what you don't do, like we talked last week, is you've got a whole separate issue with locker rooms and with someone declaring.
This is another solution without a
You
problem.
all invited this. You invented rather this
Right.
issue.
No.
You invented it out of
It's
whole cloth.
another
It was
solution.
it was a non-issue.
It's a
I've never
solution
heard
for not
anything
a
from the White
problem.
House or from President Obama about transgender bathrooms
Stop.
until you all
Be factual.
contrived it.
The Charlotte City Council, a gang of left-wingers, passed an ordinance opening up the city's bathrooms.
Yeah, with these local
Passed
ordinances.
an
You're-
local
anti-discrimination
Democrats
municipal
did
ordinance,
this,
as
playing
has
to
happened
Obama.
in Atlanta and elsewhere around the nation.
You know, goes beyond discrimination. It is absolutely
There's nothing to
caused
do
a
with
legal-
discrimination.
That's
It's
right.
about
It has
hygiene.
everything to do with discrimination. It has nothing to do with hygiene. It has to do with discrimination and
Well, it has
equal
to do with
protection under the law.
privacy, too.
All right,
Privacy.
we got to change subject. So that could derail the Super Bowl, though I think that's a long shot and a long way off. But this week, the state said to the city of Atlanta, fix the streetcar. They gave them 49 things on the streetcar that had to be fixed. It's interesting to me that the state is paying that much attention to the streetcar because no one rides it. Multiple television reports show the cars empty, empty, empty.
Well, it's also accident prone, they said. And I tell you what, we always said this was a white elephant.
But how can
to
anybody
begin
be
with.
hurt if there's nobody on it?
The only thing I can suggest now that we're saddled with this huge problem is maybe Marta can run it better.
Well, Marta is running, and I think that Marta's going to take a larger role in this.
Marta's not fully in charge.
They are not fully in
look,
charge.
you're looking at, I don't want to call it a technology, but a mode of transit that hadn't been around for a long time, and there's not a lot of examples nationally of how to run this thing successfully. Atlanta's, out of all of them that are out there, Atlanta's one of the best. So the state and the FTA through the state of Georgia has issued these guidelines, most of them safety related, and they're going to get fixed by June 14. I guarantee you, the state is not going to shut down the streetcar, and if they do, yeah, you need to look at the Super Bowl. You need to look at the Super Bowl over your transgender
We've heard
bathrooms and
this
your
story
lawsuits.
for so long. It's going to be
Right.
fixed every few months. That's what they keep saying.
That's it. Did you just say that? Did I hear you say that?
No.
They'll require that the streetcars have transgender bathrooms on board? Is that what
No,
you said?
He didn't say that.
didn't say anything of the
But
sort.
I do think they are going to address it, and they will get it fixed, and it will eventually become a very popular mode of transportation from the very popular tourist destinations that are in downtown Atlanta, particularly from the King Center to the Centennial.
Anyway, we
it's
got
like-
the
it's
Super
like, It's
Bowl.
like you got a 3-year-old at home and you're asking, why aren't you a brain surgeon? I mean, we've got to give this thing an opportunity to really mature,
You know, we're
and
talking
grow
about
up,
a waste
and,
of taxpayer
and,
money.
and link into the Beltline, and when you're dead and gone, it's going to be a very popular thing.
It's been a waste
Jeff.
of taxpayer money.
Phil, they're going to scatter Jeff's ashes on the bet. He loves it so much they're going to scatter his ashes there.
Let me tell you
Liberals
what.
love boondoggles.
There you go.
Well, you know.
All right, we're going to rearrange again because we've got so much news this week. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about elections, the big runoff in Cobb County. But first, Kasim Reed's Friday Night Massacre. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
You don't see this one very often. In fact, you really haven't seen it since the presidency of Richard Nixon. But before last week even began, Mayor Kasim Reed had done the unusual. At 10 p.m. on Friday, he fired Miguel Southwell, the general manager of Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. I think all of us, whatever we were doing Friday night, were stunned by the timing.
Yeah.
Not so much, I think, by the removal of of a city department head. There are reasons that those things happen, but this one was strange because, in my mind anyway, Southwell had been the national point man on reacting to the TSA and the travel delays and the long lines at the airports. Now, maybe that's why he got fired. I don't know. Jeff, what do you think?
Well, I mean, you did have some long lines. Under Lewis Miller, you had lines that were about 21 minutes, and now you've got lines that are about 71 minutes, and sometimes they're over 90 minutes. And, you had construction during the long lines, which didn't help matters much. But I think that really, probably one of the issues that came to the fore more than anything else was the deal with Delta Airlines. That was an agreement that should have been reached by the end of 2015, and it was not reached until the very last day that Richard Anderson was in his job. That's when he signed that 20-year agreement with the airport. And so you had the opportunity really of losing this great relationship between the mayor and the CEO of Delta Airlines. And it almost came to pass that happened. And so, a little bit of speculation on my part. I think that the city council has been fully briefed on this issue. You haven't heard a peep from city council.
That's a good point.
From not one of them.
Well,
and I think that part of the reason why you haven't heard any criticism from any of them, is because they know that deal almost got scuttled.
Now, fewer than 24.
Let me give you the rest of the story. And the rest of the story is, unfortunately, the mayor has been known in the last couple of years to have some temper tantrums, and he and Miguel Southwell just did not get along. And one of the big problems, and it goes back to not just this mayor, but the previous mayors, are the contracts, the money. Follow the money. One of the problems that Miguel Southwell had, and I'll give free advice to the next manager: get a contract. When I heard that Southwell had no contract, I knew that Kasim Reed was in total control, and you could just fire him.
Here's the thing about conservatives.
So Southwell,
wait a minute.
Southwell, let me finish my point. Let me finish my point.
Yeah.
Southwell didn't want to go along with some of these contracts for Kasim's friends. There you go.
Lewis Miller didn't have a contract. The mayor is dead set against public sector contracts, and it seems to me that would make sense to conservatives.
Oh, I would want a contract.
You are the folks that for the last 30 years have been saying in public, Dick,
it's a right to work state.
That you should not have a contract in a public job. And the mayor has been steadfast on that issue.
We got to move. We got to move.
I don't care. I don't care. I would advise anybody to get a contract with this mercurial mayor.
So after the Friday night massacre, within about 12 hours or so, the mayor also fired Joanne Macrina, the head of the Watershed Management Department. Now, I always thought that she was a problem going in because she came from DeKalb.
Stop.
I mean, that just seemed to me to be a deal breaker. But anyway, he let her go. Now, that one was more easy to understand. I think we don't have to dwell on it. Watershed Management has had trouble for 20 years. It's been a disaster.
The fact of the matter, she had a tremendous amount of stability there. I mean, she was there for 5 years. Lewis Miller, Miguel Southwell was the deputy. He was the deputy general manager. He was promoted when Lewis Miller retired, and so in both of those positions, she had a tremendous amount of stability. Lewis Miller was GM at the airport all the way through the first term.
If you want to talk about the watershed, they still need to get cleaned up.
Well, yeah, I mean, but still, she was there for 5 years, right?
They didn't know how much equipment they owned.
Well, there's been so much turmoil because, at one time it was privatized. They tried to outsource it, and then they brought it back, and it's just been a lot of up and down about it. So
well, you can say this. Kasim Reed, if he sees there's a problem, he seems to move to fix it. Or if you take the other view, he moves to protect himself.
Right.
And actually, those two aren't mutually exclusive.
They're not mutually exclusive. You want a city that runs well, and I think that's what his focus is.
All right, we're gonna get all twisted around the clock here, but start the election coverage in Cobb County. We'll get to the bigger picture in a minute, but there's a runoff in Cobb County for chairman between Tim Lee and Mike Boyce. It's unusual in that Lee ran a rather poor second. Mike Boyce almost won it outright. He had 49%. Lee had 41%. I, of course, suspected there would be a runoff. I didn't think Lee would run second. This is a vote by a tiny percentage of voters against the Atlanta Braves and economic development in Cobb County. I see no other way to
Dick, there's another side to this that we've talked about, and it's transparency, and that was the big issue that Mike Boyce said. And if you're going to spend $400 million of taxpayers' money, you want to have a public referendum. Yeah. And I think that was the big issue where Tim Lee, that was his weakness. And
No,
so
we're a representative democracy.
I think everybody likes. I think everybody likes the fact that the Braves are there, except for the traffic problem. But
Well, it's gonna be
that was the whether you agree with it or
yeah.
not. It was that taxpayer money.
I don't think you have to have a referendum, though. That's the you
Well-
don't do that.
Well, you do
sort
it
of
for
thing.
bond issues. Why not for this big one?
This wasn't a bond issue. Well,
It was even bigger than a bond issue.
It was bigger than a bond issue in the sense it was tapping into tax revenues.
It could be a whole bunch of issues.
I don't
mean,
know
the
how
fact that
politically-
the Braves are doing so very poorly,
Poorly.
it could have been influenced. And this spate of news recently about Braves ownership and how they're really just a real estate entity and have been ripped off, not just in Cobb County but everywhere else. But Cobb County obviously is the poster child for that. Folks who have read that story would probably vote.
Pearl,
accordingly.
Mississippi, yes, Gwinnett County. I understand all that. All right, the clock's against us. We'll have a lot more time to talk about Tim Lee's runoff against Mike Boyce. I don't see how Tim Lee gets there myself, looking at those numbers.
He's in
because
trouble.
the Savage
definitely
votes,
in
the votes for Larry Savage, are in effect.
Remember, it's July.
Anti-Lee votes.
It's July
Yeah.
26th. The only hope for Tim Lee is that everybody goes on vacation.
That's not a good hope to
Ooh,
base your.
doesn't that cut two ways? All right.
It
Yeah.
can.
All right, when we come back, our wrap up of the Tuesday primaries. We're only about 18% of Georgians chose to vote. Disgraceful. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
All my planning is now out the window. So at the top of the ticket in Tuesday's primaries, let's just touch these very briefly. Johnny Isakson, of course, won a huge victory in the Republican primary. No surprise there. Jim Barksdale won a not so huge victory over two no-names in the Democratic primary. And we'll have a lot of time to talk about that campaign as well, because that's a November race. The interesting things really were on the local side of things. We spotlighted Cobb County, of course, but there was a big cleanup in DeKalb County as well. Michael Thurmond, as we all predicted, won easily and will be the new chief executive. He faces token Republican opposition in the fall,
Right.
which means Lee May now is guaranteed that he'll stay on, I think. The governor won't pull him back. But the big race was in the district attorney's office, where Sherry Boston, the solicitor, really rather handily beat the incumbent district attorney, Robert James. You just don't see that very often.
You don't see it in incumbent races for district attorneys. There's no question about that. And this was a this was a thrashing like we haven't seen in a long time. But there were a lot of folks out there who were very upset with Robert James, his prosecution of Burl Ellis.
Yes.
I think that this is clearly a mandate, a message from
Can I
voters that they
rephrase
thought that
Let me
was.
rephrase that.
What's
His-
that?
His prosecution of Burl Ellis, when there may have been bigger fish to fry besides Ellis.
Well, I think
well,
that was another case.
and the-
There
and
was
the-
more
and the-
corruption.
Ellis-
than the-
If
Ellis-
there weren't, and he did it twice, not once but twice, right?
But you know, I always said
Ellis
when
was
all-
prosecuted for fundraising. You know, we can put all the
Right.
politicians
No
in
money
jail.
in his pocket.
Right?
Right.
He didn't put a dime
No
in his
money
pocket.
in his pocket. I
he
agree.
didn't put a dime in his pocket. When I made that point, I think that the current DEA filed a contempt motion against me.
That's right, he did. I forgot about that.
And you know, these are the kinds of actions that we've seen on his part that I think led to this vote.
Well,
also,
you know, when we saw all four of us on the Georgia Gang agree that Sherry Boston would be the better DA, that tells you something with the greater electorate.
Yeah, right.
Well,
She was qualified. She was a solicitor. She knew how to do the job. You had all these ethical issues surrounding Robert James. It was time, and I think you want to point to some winners of the week or of the year. It's the DeKalb County voters. Not a lot of them went out, but the ones who went
well,
out
they
made
also
some
defeated
very
Stan
smart
Watson,
choices.
the former commissioner, in the tax collector's race, the tax commissioner's
You know,
race.
Thank goodness.
the county clearly needs to change direction, and it needs to change its image, and I think that with this election it did so. And I will add this, it's not the first time that it's happened, because I remember when Cynthia McKinney got booted out after she embarrassed the folks in DeKalb County.
Yeah, that's true. Now, it was a good time to be a sheriff. We'll just say very quickly that Butch Conway and Gwinnett, Neil Warren and Cobb, and the DeKalb County Sheriff, Jeffrey Mann, all succeeded in their reelection bids. And of course, Victor Hill in Clayton County, there we go again.
He's still
He
in.
won easily against a big field. Ted Jackson, the Fulton County Sheriff, surprisingly, is in a runoff with a former sheriff, Richard Langford. We'll have time to discuss that as well in the
Right.
coming weeks. And the East Bloss, the the education special option sales taxes were passed in Fulton and DeKalb, and DeKalb by a far larger margin than I had anticipated. I think, Jeff, was it 71 to 29?
Yeah, it was up there. Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
It lost, by the way, in Dunwoody. I think that's important, where the real controversy had been about the ballot question not being properly
Well,
prepared.
yeah, apparently they want an independent school district up there. Is that right?
Yeah, but that didn't affect this vote. This was
Okay.
about the fact that the
And they also
ballot,
want the
ballot
school
may be
district
illegal and may be sued.
to forego dollars for the TAD while they pursue an independent school
No,
district.
DeKalb.
It's interesting.
In SPLOST 4, DeKalb was promised a new Austin Elementary School.
Yeah.
And that was 5 years ago, and it's still not off the drawing board, much less getting
Done.
moving into reality. In Congress, we were all over the lot on these races on the gang. I don't think, I will say this, I don't think we all fully understood the dynamics. We now know in the aftermath that the anti-incumbent thing we thought was there and the strength of the Tea Party, both of those things were overestimated, because in the 11th district, Barry Loudermilk won without a runoff against a crowded field.
Well, let me just comment on what you just said. What's funny when you talk about so-called Tea Party influence.
They are Tea Party, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna
All
say,
these people
they
are
couldn't get any more
conservatives.
conservative than
They're
they
all
already
different
are.
stripes of conservatives. I'm not surprised at all. If you like your local conservative congressman in the GOP primary, he got reelected.
Well, Doug Collins wanted to walk
He won the
in
biggest,
north central
yeah.
Georgia. And the only runoff now we're going to see is in the 3rd congressional district, which meanders
was
from
open.
Fayette County down to Columbus and out to West Georgia. Mike Crane there, a former state senator, is in runoff with Drew Ferguson, the former mayor of West Point, who raised a lot of money.
He did, and he's very popular.
He is popular. Well, West Point's a great success story.
yeah.
Due to Kia, but
That's
I
going to be a
guess he
tight
gets
race.
to take credit.
That's going to be a tight race.
Interesting, yeah.
Yes, 2 incumbent legislators lost. DeKalb's Ron Mayo and then Ernest Smith in Augusta.
Yeah,
Don't know him.
he was ethically challenged, and the Democrats in Augusta, to their credit, got rid of him.
Vernon Jones. Vernon is in a runoff.
Vernon's
Yeah.
back.
DeKalb and Rockdale counties. He almost got that thing without a runoff.
He almost
sure
got it
did.
without a
He
runoff.
sure
He was
did.
a tough vote getter.
You know, there's a runoff in your area.
There is. My town of Brookhaven has a runoff between Megan Hansen, our sometime colleague,
Yes.
and Alan Cole, a
That's right.
fresh young lawyer against a tired old businessman.
And,
Did I say that?
Yeah.
And Catherine Bernard was the 3rd candidate, and she didn't make it.
But she holds the key to the election.
Yes.
Who she
Catherine Bernard
endorses.
ran it. Darn
Right.
good campaign, by the way.
That's right. By the way, I think we ought to mention one other hot primary that happened, and a lot of people were looking at it. That's Senator Brandon Beach up in Alpharetta.
Yep.
He won, and I think it's very interesting that he won because, he championed the tax increase for infrastructure, and he also had some bold
Transportation.
vision on MARTA.
He's been
and so
very
he
courageous.
was protected by his voters.
Yep.
And we got to get out, but in your home district,
Yes.
where Joe Wilkinson
He retired.
had been done in by a couple of Brutuses
That's exactly
named
right.
Rusty Paul and Wendell Willard.
They supported.
Joe endorsed Deborah Silcox, and she won.
She did. Graham McDonald, who was endorsed by the mayor, and Wendell Willard went down to defeat. And boy, the mayor's
Rusty
very
Paul's
embarrassed.
real close
Well,
to.
and also, as we said last week, Emma Darnell prevailed against Bill Edwards.
forgot about
in Fulton
that.
County
You're right.
Commission.
That's
Okay.
right. That was a big one.
All right, we got to get out. I will just observe that if Rusty Paul keeps this up, his avocation of beekeeping could become his vocation. All right, when we come back, winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
Lots to go around here. We'll begin with you, Jeff.
Thank you. Well, the Super Bowl's a winner. My only hope is that Josh McCoon doesn't call for a boycott. The Atlanta Braves have got to be a loser. Turner Field, they are 2-20 unless they won a game over the last 2 days. And Donald Trump's a winner. He has secured effectively the nomination, the Republican nomination.
Absolutely. And you, Miss Alexis.
All right, I'm going to salute Mother Hughes. Mary Sally Clark Hughes passed this week at 102 years old. She was a great Atlanta humanitarian and icon. She used to give boxes of clothes to people on her birthday every year. 100 100 boxes at 100. And her son, Herbert Bridgewater, was her great caretaker, devoted son. So she'll be missed.
All right, and you, Phil.
You know, the Governor Nathan Deal was a loser this past week. He's not going to the Republican State Convention in Augusta that's coming up June 3rd and 4th. The base is not happy. If you were at the Walton County GOP barbecue, the governor was criticized almost as harshly as Barack Obama because of his vetoes of the campus safety gun bill and also RFRA.
And Jeff, you're right about Trump. He did clinch the nomination. And a big event for Hillary Clinton this week, the State Department audit, was all over her about the improper use of her private server and emails. And that story is just beginning to get some legs. As to the Braves, I have 2 words for all you Braves fans. Bud Norris. That's all I need to say. Emblemizes this team. All right, and finally, my old friend Kim Peterson on Y106.7, kind of a sister station to Fox 5, got ripped by this outgoing talk show host, Michael Graham, whose ego is larger than all outdoors. And Kim responded, and then some. Good for you, Kimmer. And hey,
And Michael's gone.
Michael's gone, that's right. And we'll see you next week on the Georgia Gang.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.